Hey, what's happening, everybody? This is Julius Hammond. I am about to interview Jack Barsky, Mr. Jack Barsky. He has a book called Deep Undercover, and he's a former KGB agent for the Soviet Union, for Russia. And we're going to get deep, guys. We're going to talk about his lifestyle as a KGB agent, if he's afraid that they're still coming after him, and, his life being in America now compared to, living undercover. So, I want you guys to tune in to the episode. Make sure you like, subscribe, and you hit that notification bell so you can know what's about to happen for future episodes. Stay tuned. On the Wealth Chance podcast, I'm your host, Julius Hammond, here with another fire episode with another fire guest. But before I introduce who my guest is, I want you guys to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and comment on the video, man, because it helps the algorithm with my podcast to get us out there, to get the episode out there, and to get the more value out there for you guys. Okay, so my guest today, he's a former KGB spy sleeper agent, author of the book called Deep Undercover, and a podcast show called The Agent. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Albrecht Diedrich, a.k.a. Jack Barsky. Hey, Jack Barsky, how you doing, brother?
You butchered my name the same way my daughter does, and she actually changed her last name to Dietrich. But it's very difficult to pronounce this for Americans, so no problem. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Okay, so how do you say the name? Is it Albrecht or Albrecht? How you say it?
No, it's Albrecht.
Albrecht.
So the sound is difficult, and the R sound is also different from the American R, and then you have Dietrich, another R and another sound. It's ugly. German is an ugly language.
It's
from a sound perspective.
Absolutely. Well, I apologize for butchering the name. I tried my best to get it right, but hey, I'll work on it for next time. So Jack, I've been knowing you for a little bit now, not that long, but we met, through the Metal Group, which is ran by our good friend Ken Rotowski. Shout out to Ken and Metal Man group for that. And when I heard about you, I was like, okay, that name sounds familiar, Jack Barsky. So I started doing some research. And I said, oh, he's been on Valuetainment with Patrick Bet-David. He's been on Lex Fridman's show. And I was like, okay, this he's been on Vlad TV. I said, okay, this is the Jack Barsky. Okay, cool. So I was like, I gotta interview this guy because your story is very amazing. But for the audience here, can you let the audience know the story of Jack Barsky? Now, before you get into the KGB stuff, just your story growing up and everything, how you grew up, with your parents and everybody.
I gotta limit myself to the Cliff Notes version because the story as it unfolds is incredibly tangled, twisted, complex. With so many twists and turns that were not foreseeable. So here we go with the Cliff Notes version. I was born in 1949 in a part of Germany that was 4 years after the end of World War II, and was born in the part of Germany that was occupied by the Soviet forces, Soviet Union, and this country eventually became a communist country, a vassal state to the Soviet Union. So I grew up in hardcore communism, and that shaped the path that I took because I was that was my belief system, communism. That we as the communist nations had a task to free all the suffering workers in the capitalist systems and create the communist paradise for the working class on this earth. The other thing that helped shape my trajectory, so to speak, was that I was given a phenomenal gift, and it's a highly functioning brain. So when I started studying, many years in school I didn't study, I just did the homework. When I started studying, I wound up getting nothing but A's. So I became a high school valedictorian. I became what is the equivalent in East Germany of the United States of valedictorian. I had all A's in college, and that combination of being ideological sound, according to the Communist Party, and a really smart guy, brought me to the attention of KGB recruiters who contacted me in my junior year in college. And for about 18 months, we like felt each other out. The idea that was brought to me was that, they had an idea to send me as an illegal to West Germany. So in other words, become another person. As an illegal, you operate not under the ID that is really yours, but you take on a different ID, and that meant I would have to go and left my past behind and so forth. After 18 months, they decided that they were actually going to make me an offer. They really tested me with every which way. And when the offer came, I was really not quite prepared. And they gave me just about 24 hours to say yes or no. And it was a tough decision, but eventually my tendency to be adventurous, the cause that I was going to serve, a noble cause, and the ability to live in the Western world, that was very appealing. And so I said, yeah. So at the time I was already an assistant professor at college, and I quit that job and started my training, which was 2 years in Berlin. And as it turned out, during the 2 years, I was required to learn a foreign language. And I was able to pick, and I picked English. And within about a year and a half, I was so good that I really impressed my KGB superiors. And they had like a brainstorm and says, "My God, this guy is good enough. We can send him to the United States as a born American." So I relocated to Moscow, Russia, and spent 2.5 years there, getting more training, but particularly refining my English, because I was able to work with 3 different native speakers. And at the end of that training, let's put it this way, I wound up coming to the United States in 1978, and what I had with me was a birth certificate under the name of Jack Barsky, which was a young man who passed away at the age of 11. And we stole that identity. And as I wound up in New York City, I spent about a year to acquire the 2 documents that were necessary to work and live as an American. It was a driver's license and a Social Security card. And my first job was bike messenger, because I couldn't take my resume with me. And so slowly but surely, I did 2.5 years as a bike messenger. And then I went to college in the U.S. and I got a degree in business with a concentration in information systems, became a programmer. And while I was still an active agent, in 1988, I quit the service of the KGB. The reason being that they thought I was about to be arrested by the FBI. Why they thought that, I don't know, but they were certain that I had to leave the country. And after a lot of back and forth, I decided I will not follow their instructions, and I let them know. The reason that I stayed back in the United States, unbeknownst to them, I had a 18-month-old pretty little girl, a daughter that was born in the U.S. and who I had fallen in love with. I never loved anybody like that before,
Mm-hmm.
and there is no greater love than that I had for this girl. So I decided to take the risk and stay so I could take care of her. And I told them to make sure that they wouldn't come after me. I told them that I can't come because I have HIV/AIDS, and I didn't know that would work, but it did work. They told my German family that I had passed away, and so that at that point I was actually married to Chelsea. That's her name, Chelsea's mother,
Mm-hmm.
and I told her, we can now look at maybe buying a house, and within a year, we moved into the suburbs, and I started working on my American dream, my version of the American dream. And 9 years later, another event happened that changed my life again, because the FBI finally got wind of me, that I existed, and they introduced themselves, which was one of the best things that ever happened in my life, because I already had become very much an American, and I had 2 children, a house in the country, and I had no reason to not cooperate. I cooperated fully, and in the end, it resulted in my ability to become a citizen 7 years ago. And here I am. A year later, I started writing my book, and so I'm now writing and speaking in public, very busy, and I'm incredibly grateful the way what everybody can see. I'm in my 70s. The way my last chapter, hopefully it's going to be a long one, has turned out. I'm very happy to be here, and quite frankly, and that's not an exaggeration, I'm intellectually, legally, and emotionally an American. I'm not a German anymore. I have German roots, but if I had a choice, I would not ever want to go back and live in Germany. And that's the end of the Cliff Notes version.
Well, that's a very good Cliff Note version. Well, thank you for that story. I did read Deep Undercover, and it's an awesome book, bestseller on Amazon. So if you guys haven't got it, make sure you get it. Deep Undercover on Amazon by Jack Barsky. A couple questions from what you were just discussing right now. So you said you came into the United States in 1978, and
yes.
When you came into the United States, did you have specific information, or you obviously were espionage for the KGB, but you had specific instructions you were supposed to do while you were here for the KGB, and then you got sidetracked because of you falling in love and having a child? Or did you accomplish everything you need to accomplish with them, and then that kind of happened within the mix of you doing your job as a KGB agent?
I got to give you some background, and I didn't even know that when I finished the book. I found the information in a couple of interviews that were given by the ex-heads of the Directorate S, the Illegals Directorate,
Mm-hmm.
and I was never told that this was important to the KGB. And during the height of the Cold War, there was an intelligence war going on. The CIA against the KGB,
Mm-hmm.
and most of the agents, fundamentally, almost all the agents that the Soviets had in the United States were diplomats, and there was a constant back and forth. The United States kicking diplomats out because they were caught spying, and the Soviet Union retaliated, and there was a good chance that diplomatic relations would be broken off altogether, in which case the only active agents they would have had in the United States, the KGB would have had in the United States, was us illegals. I was not ever told that this was the most important task I had, to live as an American.
Mm.
I was not given any instructions. I'm sure they would have come if diplomatic relations would have broken off, but that was important. I had other tasks, particularly what they were focused on me getting to know as many people as I could know, and and finding out whether they had access to secret information and whether they would be recruitable because of weaknesses, whatever financial situations, addictions, and so forth. And I had a couple of special tasks, so I was still operating, working on these tasks. One of them was also to periodically visit the Naval Weapons Station Earl, which is still in existence. It's on the coast of New Jersey, to see if I find any signs, visible signs, whether there's preparations for war. So I was clearly still working for them, with them, when I decided to drop the bomb and told them I'm not coming back. So the mission was not fulfilled.
Okay. Wow. Okay, so another question for you. What makes the KGB intelligence agency different from other agencies such as the CIA, the British intelligence, and FBI, other intelligence agencies? What makes them different from those other agencies?
Well, first of all, the level of secrecy, the KGB was number one. For instance, if you want to join the CIA, you can apply. If I had wanted to become a KGB agent, I wouldn't have known where to go. There was no telephone number. There was no office that said KGB on the door, and they took the secrecy to an extreme by using compartmentalization, extreme compartmentalization. In other words, they would give you only as much information as they thought you would need to do your job. That was sometimes rather limiting, because in certain situations I had to make decisions for which I didn't have background. And there were defectors, there were moles on both sides of the Berlin Wall, so to speak. So there were some high-level Soviet spies that actually worked for MI6 or the CIA, and there were a couple of the traitors in the United States that gave information to the Soviets.
Okay.
But in general, with regard to getting back to secrecy, the United States is a country of leakers. There's almost nothing you can keep secret. I mean, there's always somebody who will go out in public. That leaking within the Soviet Union fundamentally did not happen. The only ones that were speaking against the state were either imprisoned or were allowed to emigrate. But leaking of secrets within the KGB didn't happen. And the other thing is that the KGB was a lot more brutal when it came to dealing with defectors. They managed to assassinate a few of them, and they had a list of folks that they wanted to take to their lives. They wanted to end. It's not an easy operation, so they weren't successful in many of the cases. So these are the major differences. Other than that, intelligence work with regard to what we call tradecraft, what you need to know how to operate as an agent, that is pretty much as if there were an international standard. The secret agents on both sides operated in a very similar fashion, and that resulted in, when I eventually was able to come out of the closet, I befriended a lot of retired CIA and FBI, and we found out that we pretty much had a lot in common.
Wow. Now, you were saying the KGB was very brutal on, if they wanted to get rid of somebody, they would get rid of them.
Yep.
Now, we're on YouTube, so I kind of gotta watch what we say a little bit. But is it kind of like where, if someone's undercover on a drug deal or something and they find out someone is a rat, then they have to get rid of them in a certain type of way. That's what you mean when you talk about getting rid of them?
Well, there's one case that I actually know because it was actually it was made known even in the East German press. There was a Bulgarian agent operating in England, and this fellow, Markov was his last name. This fellow was assassinated. He was poked with an umbrella that had a poison tip.
Oh wow!
You remember the attempt to get rid of Sergei Skripal in England with a chemical poison that didn't quite succeed but almost killed him. And then there was another case, I forgot this fellow who was given radioactive material in a tea or whatever, and he passed away. I was once tasked to find a person it was a Russian name, and at the moment it just escapes me, but it doesn't really matter. They asked me to find out whether this individual still lived in California and taught at UCLA. I found him, and accidentally, I met him face to face. That's in the book. It was really interesting. I saw what he looked like. I knew his name, and one day I watched late night television, and he was interviewed, and he said, he had defected from the KGB, and so it's quite clear that they wanted me to, find out where he is and how he could be assassinated in some way. I'm glad that he died from natural causes, but so there was always somehow in. By the way, Russia of today operates in a similar fashion. The most important thing for the KGB and even the Russian intelligence, if they assassinate a defector, is to send a message to others. Like, listen, if you think you want to defect, you're playing with your life. It's not so much the vengeance or justice, whatever you want to call it. It's the message itself.
Wow. Well, speaking of Russia, there's a well-known president named Vladimir Putin that, we won't get too much into him as far as, his roles and what's been going on from videos and my research on him. But did he have any role with the KGB?
Oh, yeah. He was an agent. He was a mid-level agent at best.
Okay.
He unlike me, I was trained in only in one-on-one sessions. There was no class. Mr. Putin was a member of a class, and he learned German very well. And they sent him to East Germany, to the city of Dresden. That's not too far from where I grew up. And just to give you an idea of what those agents in friendly countries were doing, this guy Putin was a liaison to the Stasi, East German secret police, and people like him would recruit people like me and work with them, but they weren't very active in intelligence gathering because there was no intelligence to be gathered in one of the countries of the Warsaw Pact. He may have done a little bit of courier work because of his ability to speak German, but he was just not one of the top-notch agents, because you would want to send those to, say, Austria or Switzerland, where there was real action. There was no action in Dresden, Germany. It doesn't mean that Putin wasn't a capable guy, because, he managed to work his way all the way up to become the president
Russia.
of Russia and managed to stay in power for 20 years. As a politician, he's one of the most successful politicians in history, and that's not there's not a statement of admiration; it's a statement of fact.
Absolutely. Now, I'm kind of a novice on this, but Yuri, what's his last name?
Bezmenov?
Yeah, Bitmanov. Yes. What was his? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
You watched the interview with Patrick Betavid.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah.
And he had the gall to argue with me about Bezmenov. Bezmenov made everything that he shared with the United States audience was made up in his head.
Okay.
It was not possible for the KGB to come up with a kind of a masterful plan, because they didn't know how the United States functions. I was trained by the ones that thought they knew best, and they had no clue how America functions. So it's right from that point of view, how do you come up with this masterful plan and execute on it? So number one. Number two, I told you that the KGB was master in compartmentalization. And Mr. Bezmenov, he was KGB, but he operated in India. You think that kind of a super secret plan to bring down the arch enemy of the Soviet Union got into the hands of an agent who operated in India? Impossible. And lastly, there's a book that was based on notes smuggled out over many, many years by a fellow named Barsky Mitrokin. He was an archivist. And he described how fundamentally, the book is called The Sword and the Shield, and it talks about how the KGB operated in the West. And what we called it in those days was active measures. That means seeding misinformation into Western media to try to undermine stability and trust in democracy in the Western countries. And Mitrokin clearly states that this directorate, where people were sitting at desks who had no idea how the USA functions, had to come up with a bunch of lies that actually could stick. And this directorate was the least desirable because he didn't get to travel to the West. So they didn't even have the best people there. So the active measures had some success, but what Bezmenov shared with the United States was extremely well thought out in his own mind. And he had enough gullible people who believe in that, and they still believe in it. What we have today, which is a whole lot more credible, is the efforts of Russia, but also China and some other hostile countries to seed discord within the United States, and they are significantly more successful today than the KGB was in Bezmenov's day.
Yeah, I tend to side with you, especially when it comes to Yuri's position being way in India, having this plan, this masterful grand plan to take down America all the way from India. I highly doubt that you can come up with something that diabolical from that far a distance. I mean.
Well, no, and also let's say that, first of all, this kind of a plan would have required a bit of a team.
Yes.
That team would have been so isolated and secluded, simply because if that ever leaks, you got a big problem in the world.
Yeah.
Okay, so that couldn't have leaked to India. That makes no sense.
Absolutely. Let's come back to. I was reading a book and it was talking about the Young Pioneers program when you were a kid. Talk about that a little bit and what it was like. I read a part, I think it was on chapter 3, if I'm not mistaken, where you were talking about how your mom wouldn't let you play outside after 6 p.m. and you had to be back in the house for a certain different type of reasons. But Talk about the Young Pioneers program, what that meant to you growing up.
Well, the Young Pioneers, it was almost automatic that you joined the Pioneers the moment you started school, first grade. If you didn't join the Young Pioneers, it was possible to not join, but you became an outcast.
Okay.
Every after-school activity that you had access to was run by the Young Pioneers, and we also were trained ideologically. It was obviously age appropriate. You know, we didn't study Marxism Leninism, but we heard about how bad the West German capitalists were, how much the children and the working class suffered. And we learned about how wonderful the Soviet Union was, and how the future was ours. Mm-hmm. And you got this kind of brainwashing over and over and over again. It came out of teachers' mouths. My parents were like sort of quiet in the house, but it doesn't matter. There were radio programs that were directed at children. When the TV came out, there were TV programs, and it was just when you brainwashed that way at a young age, this becomes sort of the truth as you know it. And I've been telling people all the time, when everybody that you know will tell you that the moon is made out of cheese, that you will just believe that the moon is made out of cheese. With regard to the bedtime, this was part of the very rigid German discipline. This was not associated with the Young Pioneers. It was just my mother enforcing the rigid rules. Even in the summertime, you know, I had to be in bed by 6, regardless of whether it was still light outside.
Wow.
I wasn't allowed to read a book until, you know, I was ready to sleep. That discipline, that's still part of my being, but it allowed me to be successful also as an undercover agent, because you have to be super disciplined and punctual, and you just do what you have to do. So, unbeknownst to her, my mother actually helped me prepare for life as an undercover agent.
Yeah, I say the same thing when it comes to my grandfather. My granddaddy served in the Navy, and he would, when I was adolescent, he would get me up at 4:30, 5 o'clock. Sometimes if he did let me sleep, he'll let me sleep till 6 o'clock in the morning. But he will always say, you know, Jew man, you know, that's my nickname. He called me Jew man. Time to get up. I'm like, Granddad, my mom and everybody else still sleep. No, those are the women. We don't care what they do. We men, we get up early. So he would have me cook breakfast and iron and do all this stuff. And back then I was like, come on, man, this is ridiculous. But I didn't understand he was training me to, when I get older, to be disciplined, because like I said, he served in the Navy and he was very disciplined. You know, he's very militant in a lot of stuff that he did. So I can understand that. But is there anything that happened, or is just more so programming when it came to your mom making sure you're in the house by 6 p.m. and sleep around that time? Or is just something happened in her younger years that made her feel like, okay, well, I need to make sure this doesn't happen to my kids, so let me make sure I stay disciplined when it comes to being in at 6 p.m. Was that like a tragic event or something that happened?
I wouldn't know, because I was in the presence of my 2 sets of grandparents frequently.
Okay.
They never shared with us children. I had a brother, or with their children in our presence, things that happened in the past. And you got to understand that they had just lost the war. They were at one point at least sympathetic to the Nazi movement, but I think one of my grandfathers was actually a member of the Nazi Party, and so they were ashamed of their past.
Okay.
And they just tried to suppress all of it. So the discipline aspect was just very German in those days, and and there was no love in that family. Love, the only way they expressed love was by taking care of the children and the grandchildren physically and materially to the way they could. But I can't remember having heard "I love you" spoken by my grandparents and spoken by my parents to each other as well to us children. So it was a very cold, highly disciplined childhood that I had, and it took me a long time to overcome that and find an emotional and spiritual aspect to myself. And that started when I fell in love with my daughter Chelsea. Wasn't prepared for that, but it happened, and then I discovered that the value of loving somebody.
Yeah, I read that in the book as well. As far as I think it was your grandparents or your dad or somebody, I can't remember, who you were like yearning for that "I love you," that emotional connection, and you just wasn't getting it. And you know, and I can see why when you became a father to a beautiful baby girl, how now you understood what love really is. Because loving a child is a different connection. I have 2 kids. I have both of mine are 16. I have a daughter, biological, and a son through marriage. And when I say I love both of them rascals, I love them.
Yeah, and it's since you know my story, you know that. I took a huge risk by not going back when the KGB told me. And ultimately, the love for a child outweighed the danger that I put myself in. And luckily, it wasn't real because they were absolutely wrong. The FBI had no clue that I existed. But I didn't know. They didn't know that they were wrong, and clearly I didn't know that they were wrong. They could have been right, and then my life would have changed for the worse rather drastically.
Yeah, so you had to let's touch on that for a second. So you had to pretty much tell them a story or a lie to them so that way you could stay in the United States, because they told you to come. They told you to come back. And were there ever any threats on your life for you not wanting to come back? So if you didn't use that story, do you think that you might not be here right now?
That's speculative at best. But first of all, in order to not give the impression that I was defecting, which would have put me in some danger, I invented the story that I had contracted HIV/AIDS, which in those days was a death sentence. And they had no reason to not believe the story, and so they actually went to my German family and told them that I had died. Now, if I had not come up with that story, based on what I know, and that's secondhand, but based on what I know, they were reluctant to assassinate a defector on the territory of the United States. That may well have saved the fellow that I had to investigate. But what they were trying to do is find a way to bring the victim, the target, to another country, such as Mexico, and kill him there. So I wasn't really totally in the clear. And quite frankly, I'm not totally in the clear right now. But as I'm living in the United States, there's very little chance that somebody will come to do me harm, because the teams that can actually successfully implement an assassination, there are very few of them, and I'm not anywhere near the top of the list that they might have. Having said that, there's a number of countries I will not go to. Obviously not Russia. I would probably fall out of a window if I wound up in Moscow. and in neighboring nations such as, for instance, Turkey or the country of Georgia and so forth. Uh, I'm not bragging. I'm saying, there's one can never make I can never, nobody can prove a negative, and this is a negative. It's just speculative and highly logical. The FBI agrees with my reasoning, but I can't live in fear. I can't. I can't. If I've never lived in fear my entire life. So if I become paranoid now, that my life as I know it is over.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that because that was my question as far as are you afraid? Because you're out there. I mean, like I said, you've been on Lex Friedman, Vlad TV, Valuetainment. These top podcasts.
Listen, my first interview and public interview was on 60 Minutes.
Yeah, I remember that.
That's really out there.
Yeah, I remember that. And all these interviews that you've done have gotten, hundreds of thousands of millions of views. Lex Friedman is like almost 4 million views just for his.
Yeah.
So you're out there. And so that was my question is, are you, you answered it, but, were you ever afraid, even at your latter stages of your years right now, that they could come after you? Because the government, whether it's CIA or any type of government, is organization. It's in essence it's a gang, and a lot of gangs don't let you out, especially with the information that you have obtained over the years, without some consequences. You know what I mean? So they really don't care. It's like, hold on.
You're absolutely right. Let me repeat this. Even while I was active, while I was training, when I came to the U.S., I was never afraid, because if you operate on a basis, on a foundation of fear, you will fail.
There you go.
And I was when I sent them this last communication that I'm not going back to the other side of the Iron Curtain, I was concerned. So I took measures to determine whether I was being followed. I made sure that because I commuted from Queens, New York to Manhattan, I made sure that I was not reliably at the same spot at the same time. But after 3 months, I had determined that the FBI wasn't investigating me, and I felt that I was pretty safe with regard to the KGB, even though that concern was still with me for quite some time. But it wasn't fear. When me and the wife and my daughter moved to the suburbs and we had another child, paranoia wouldn't have helped me to raise my children. Wouldn't have helped me to earn a good living. I just decided to just let it go. And actually, over time, when the FBI finally said hello, I had fundamentally forgotten that I had ever been a spy. It was like buried in the very deep in my brain. I had encapsulated that information, and then when they said hello, it's FBI, we want to talk to you. That there was a dam that broke, and my past rushed right back in. And based on what the arresting person told me, who was a friend of mine now, that my face went white as the driven snow because of that attack of my past back into my conscience. But fear, I'm not wired to be afraid. As a matter of fact, and this is I'm not making a stupid joke. The only person I've always ever been afraid of is my second wife, because she knew me very well, and she knew my weaknesses, and she wasn't afraid to criticize me. So I always tried to hide weak moments. But generally, no.
Yeah, I think all of us who are married have have some kind of fear of our wives with certain aspects. I'm married to a Nigerian, so trust me, my wife at times, yeah, I ain't gonna say I'm fearful of her. I don't fear anything but but God. But she knows my weaknesses as well, so I concur with you on that. So a couple more questions before I let you go, Jack. So you said that when you did the new identity, which was Jack Barsky, that was actually from a dead person. Dead person's sir. Okay. So
there's still a gravestone for Jack Barsky on a cemetery in Maryland.
Wow.
I have a picture of it.
Wow. That's amazing. And then okay, you said earlier during your when you were telling about your story that you also speak, and obviously you're on podcasts and things like that. Are you doing more of that? And where can people find you?
Well, you can contact me on my website. It's at jackbarsky.com. That's simple. I have COVID killed my speaking career pretty much, but it's cranking up again. I both speak for corporate audiences and in colleges, and so in the secular realm. But I also give my testimony. I became a Christian in churches, so this is cranking up. Both of these things are cranking up, and I have been given excellent feedback wherever I show up. The audience is like spellbound, and this is not bragging. It's just like the feedback that I'm getting. And now that I have a couple of people working with me on marketing, I'm looking forward to doing more of that speaking. And I guarantee you, nobody will be bored. I recently gave a keynote at the National Mensa gathering, and that was a very, very great success. So I started out pretty lousy, but one of my favorite sayings is practice makes better, and I became a lot better than the way I started. And perfect is not part of who I define myself. It's not the way I want to define myself. There's no such thing as a perfect human being, but I got really better. And I also, what I do, I customize to the extent I find it necessary based on the audience that I will be talking to. I customize my presentations to some degree. And one other thing that makes me probably a pretty good speaker, I work with a lot of pictures. There's no bullet points on the screen. Pictures, moving, videos, sounds, so to give what I'm saying an additional dimension. So I'm a very visual person, and I just like to entertain. It's not just like talking about me and regurgitating my story, but telling people that the lessons that I learned, and telling people some things that I didn't put in the book because my publisher didn't like it. It was whatever. So there's still some, and there's stuff that happened after the book was published, and I can share that as well. So I've led a very rich life for sure, and I have lived it very, very consciously. So a lot of lessons learned that I can share.
Is there anything in your past that you would change as far as becoming a KGB agent? Do you wish you hadn't have done it? Are you okay? I know it made you who you are, but is there any little tweak you're like, okay, I wish I wouldn't have done that part because that was too much or whatever?
Well, that wasn't a little tweak. If I knew what I know now, I would not have joined. Because I had a love interest at the time, who the KGB eventually allowed me to get married to, and I was convinced that she knew what I was doing, and we figured that within 10, 12 years, I would go back and we would live as a married couple for the rest of our lives, and I promised her, and I broke that promise. So that's that's a huge, huge debt, a huge burden that I'm walking around with. She never really recovered after she was told that I died. She knows that I'm alive now because we had a child together, and we met, and we have a good relationship. But I've hurt this woman tremendously. Any other tweaks? No. See, I shouldn't have gotten married to Chelsea's mother, but I did this out of compassion because she was illegal, and I said, okay, she was a girlfriend, and I said, I can marry you so you can get the green card, and then we get a divorce. Well, then she got pregnant on purpose to make me stick around, and that resulted in me being able to talk to you today. So there's a lot of things that happened in my life that led me to where I had no active participation, so to speak, or others that had to do things or not to do things to allow me to speak to you today. And in the end, I can say I landed in a good place with some regrets, but overall, I cannot regret because I joined the KGB, not primarily for selfish reasons, because I believed in the cause.
Mm-hmm.
And that is why my ex KGB, my friends, the ex FBI, CIA agents, who all joined the government because they believed in the cause, respect me because they know I didn't do it for money and I didn't do it for selfish reasons.
Well, Jack, thank you for your awesome story. Thank you for joining the Wealth Champs podcast family here. Thank you for not only being my friend, but being a distant mentor of mine. I admire what you do. I admire what you've been through because, everybody, I love stories, man. I'm a story guy. You know what I mean? Because
me too.
I don't like talking or dealing with people who hasn't been through nothing. If someone says my life has been perfect, I tend to walk away and not deal with that person because it's something, that they're lying about deep down underneath. So I appreciate, again. Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
There is a feature of on LinkedIn that encourages you to congratulate people on their umpteenth work anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, God, how boring. You stay in the same job for like 30 years.
I know. Well, thank you.
Okay, see you on Metal, huh?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Jack. Thank you for joining the Wealth Champs podcast family. Thank you,
You're
brother.
most welcome. My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Appreciate you. Well, guys, there you have it. Had Jack Barsky on, former KGB sleeper agent, IT specialist for the KGB intelligence agency. Deep Undercover is his book. Go get it on Amazon if you haven't got it by now. It's a great book to understand where he came from and how he came and where he is right now. His story is amazing. His book is amazing. His life that he's been through is amazing, and it's just all around amazing day and all around amazing person. So thank you guys for joining the Wealth Champs podcast. This episode, Fire, Fire, Fire. Make sure you guys like, subscribe, and comment on the video. Till then, next time, love you guys. Peace.